Hey guys, and welcome. I think we've all become pretty familiar with the concept of brain rot. It genuinely seems like people's ability to focus on something or try and think outside the box is slowly disappearing. And I don't mean to sound like I'm holier than thou. Even though I don't use things like TikTok, my ability to focus on things because of Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, it's definitely had a detrimental effect on my attention span. I now have this expectation to be entertained within the first 10 seconds of clicking on a video or I'm clicking off. I try to remain somewhat engaged by reading books or reaching for movies that don't serve everything on the silver platter, but it just feels like we're being constantly bombarded with content which over explains everything and doesn't let the viewer form any critical thought. So, throughout the last few months of posting, I've been trying to mention features in my videos that don't serve everything on the silver platter. And the movies I want to talk about today just take that to the next level. And the first movie that I want to talk about is called Coherence. It came out in 2013 and it's a small movie that does something that many larger movies fail to do. It demands your attention. It's filmed almost entirely inside a house over the course of one dinner party with a cast of friends whose friendships are already strained in subtle ways. And this approach is exactly why Coherence works so well as an antidote to brain rot. It doesn't overwhelm you with information, it requires your full attention. And in order to follow the plot, you will have to remember details. You will have to ask critical questions, and you will have to sit with uncertainty. All of which are skills that many modern apps have trained us out of. So, what's this movie even about? The story begins on the night a comet passes close to Earth, an event mentioned casually, almost as background noise. A group of friends gathers for dinner, and at first the evening feels ordinary. There's mild tension between ex-partners, small jokes, some talking behind people's backs, but all in all it feels like a group of old friends is getting together for a night of catching up. But there's this minor sense that some people in the room are not fully comfortable with each other. Again, nothing out of ordinary. Then the power goes out. Phones stop working and the street outside goes dark. One house nearby still has lights on and the friends are wondering if maybe that house has a generator. This detail seems minor at first, but it becomes the point where the film quietly turns. From here on, Coherence introduces its central idea not through explanation, but through observation. Objects appear where they shouldn't be. Memories clash and information fails to line up. The characters notice these problems in fragments, often missing what matters because they're distracted by something else. As a viewer, you're as lost as the characters are, and since they don't often say things outright, you're at the mercy of their facial expressions and other minor clues. Needless to say, it lets confusion spread the way it does in real life, unevenly and without warning. The characters are then faced with the reality that no matter where they go when they leave the house they're in, they end up back in the vicinity of the same house. Throughout the movie, the audience are getting hints as to what may be happening. One of the dinner guests brings up the concept of Schrodinger's cat, which is a thought experiment which presumes that all realities exist simultaneously until an event, like opening the box and checking, makes the superposition collapse. That event then splits it into an intersecting parallel dimension. Another way of explaining it is that in quantum physics there's this idea of the observer effect. In this view, observation doesn't cause reality to collapse into one outcome. Instead, it marks the point where all possible outcomes split into separate, coexisting branches of reality, which then in turn creates the concept of many worlds. You know, like the idea that every decision can cause the reality to split up. And that would explain why different characters have different memories that pertain to the events they're talking about. The characters respond in ways that feel believable. Some want to impose order, and understandably, some want to deny what's happening. The film's strength lies in how closely it observes these reactions. The threat is abstract, but defining it or getting everyone on the same page about its existence makes it quite complex. Part of what gives Coherence its impact is how openly it embraces limitation. The budget was small. The cast was given only loose outlines of scenes rather than fixed dialogue. Much of what you hear sounds natural because it is. Apparently, the director would give the cast some notes, but that's about it. I found out about this after I watched the movie, and it just makes it so much more impressive now. People interrupt each other, they repeat themselves, they argue over details that later prove important without realizing it at the time. Conversations drift, stall, and overlap. This messiness is not a flaw, but rather it mirrors how people behave when they're confused and afraid. Without giving too much away, Coherence is a story about branching outcomes. The comet functions as a trigger that allows multiple versions of the same night, and the same group of people, to exist at once. Each version follows a slightly different path, shaped by small decisions that seemed meaningless at the time. As the characters begin to understand this, they also realize that movement between these versions is possible, though dangerous. But their efforts at fixing the situation only end up making it worse. The rules remain incomplete, and the system never fully feels under control. As a viewer, you never really get a breather because the second you stop paying attention, you're behind. Brain rot thrives on ease. It favors content that explains itself instantly, rewards minimal effort, and resets your attention every few seconds. Coherence does the opposite and challenges you. First, it demands continuity of attention. If you stop tracking details, you lose your footing. And second, it engages cause and effect in a meaningful way. Actions matter, even when their impact is delayed, and active thinking is necessary. Third, the movie avoids over-explanation. It gives you information without interpretation, and it's up to you to figure out what it means. Fourth, Coherence rewards revisiting. On the second viewing, early scenes take on a new meaning. Lines that felt casual reveal intent, and it's fascinating trying to pinpoint all the moments which really foreshadowed the events. It really is a brilliant movie, which may feel like a little bit of work, so beware. But just like sometimes we all enjoy putting whatever on and shutting the brain off, sometimes it's nice to jog our brains and see if we can keep up with the riddle or if we'd be screwed. And the second one is a movie called Primer. And similarly to the first movie, Primer was made on a budget of like $2. It was released in 2004, and the director is Shane Carruth, who also plays the role of one of the protagonists named Aaron. I honestly recommend you grab a piece of paper and a pen while watching this feature in order to keep up with all the timelines. Primer is another movie which doesn't presume that the viewer is a half-wit. It doesn't pause to explain itself, and it never checks whether you're keeping up. It presents ideas plainly, speaks in the language of its characters, and it moves on. If you fall behind, that's on you. It tells a story about time travel that feels closer to engineering notes than science fiction fantasy. That's why it works so well at killing brain rot. Primer demands focus, memory, and patience. The film follows two engineers, Aaron and Abe, who spend their free time working on small inventions in a garage. They're not dreamers chasing big ideas. They're practical, methodical, and motivated by modest success. Their conversations revolve around materials, tolerances, and processes. However, during one of their experiments, they stumble onto something unexpected. What they discover is not framed as a miracle or breakthrough, and the protagonists don't immediately know exactly what it is they've discovered. They treat it like a problem that needs refinement, so they test it, measure it. They argue about what it does and how it works. All they know is one thing, that before they try to market it, they need to figure out what it is, as they don't want to waste their opportunity. So they take their time. Many films that deal with complex ideas try to soften the impact through exposition. Primer does the opposite. It speaks in jargon when jargon would be used. It skips explanations that the characters would not bother giving each other, and it assumes this shared knowledge with the viewer. As a result, the film can feel dense. The movie recreates the experience of being inside a technical problem where clarity arrives slowly and uncertainty remains constant. The confusion mirrors the story itself, and as the characters begin to grasp the implications of what they have built, their human nature starts coming out as well, of course. And what separates Primer from most time travel stories is how unromantic it is. There's no desire to fix the past in the grand, emotional sense, and when the characters start using their invention, they do so carefully, at first. They set limits and create protocols. After all, who knows how dangerous using the machine can be in the first place? They try to protect themselves from paradox and exposure. These precautions feel sensible, but if they just kept it all up, there would be no movie. Primer often gets described as cold, and that description fits. There's no close-ups, wild acting, or crazy emotions. The performances are restrained. Emotional moments are buried under technical discussion. And at its core, Primer is about control and ownership. Once the characters realize they can move backward through time, they face questions they're not prepared to answer. Questions like, who gets access? Who decides when it's used? What counts as misuse? The film tracks how secrecy grows alongside capability. Each character believes they understand the system better than the other, even as the system becomes more unstable. Things are also happening off-screen, they're implied rather than shown. Brain rot depends on unquestionable consumption. Primer introduces questions at every level. It demands all of the same abilities Coherence does. In order to follow the plot and understand the context, you have to pay attention and focus on the details. Years after its release, Primer remains a reference point for thoughtful science fiction. I really appreciate that it didn't try to sweep the viewer off their feet with all of these answers and was surrounded by a lot of unknowns. There wasn't a neat explanation for everything. Rather, every moment of perceived clarity brought on even more questions. The characters weren't particularly likable, but they seemed like real people. If brain rot is the slow erosion of focus and thought, Primer will give your brain a workout. It forces your mind to stay active and track complexity. The one downside is that the movie can be seen as a little pretentious, but I can deal with that in this case. If you guys can think of any movies that you were impressed with because of how thoughtful they were, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you like the video, please like and or subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye.